I lost my 23-year relationship. After 2 years, my husband overheard his boss bragging about last night with me. My husband found out about our affair right now. I have lost my husband because of his foolishness. I wish I never went on that path because it has cost me a great loss. The friendship I built almost all my life is gone. My name is Eva, I am 38 years old, I am a chef, and I own a small restaurant. That is my husband's name. David and I have been married for 8 years, but we've known each other for over 23. David is 40. My husband works in estate management. We first met in high school. It was a love-hate relationship at first. I didn't like David because he was always surrounded by people. The most popular girls in school were always around him, so I never really liked that. I never really had an encounter with him in school. One day, I saw him crying after school. I didn't know what was wrong, so I asked him if he was okay. He told me that he had problems at home with his family. I felt for him because the divorce that his parents were having was taking a toll on him. I didn't know what that felt like because I had a happy home with my mother and father, who were still madly in love. So, I stayed with David and made sure he was okay before going home. From there, we became friends. He could see me at school and we could have lunch together. The people at school were surprised about our sudden friendship, but I never felt the need to explain it to them, and he didn't either. I could always invite him to my house to eat, and he liked it. I introduced him to my family, and everybody liked him. Our friendship continued to grow even after school. David was the type of guy that had everyone around him because he was good at what he did. From what I could see, he had girlfriends throughout the time we were together, and I never liked them. A few months after high school, we went to the same community college, and it was then that I started developing feelings for my best friend. People who saw us together could mistake us for a couple, but he had always brushed it off, so I kept my feelings to myself because I didn't want to lose my friendship over it. Going forward, I became jealous of the attention he gave his girlfriends. It was getting too much for me. Whenever I was trying to take my mind off him by dating other people, he could scare the guys away. We graduated from school and everyone went their own way. We never lost contact because we could see each other back home whenever he came home for the holidays. David became a good businessman and I was happy for him. A few years back, we met in our hometown for Christmas holidays when our relationship grew beyond friendship. David and I were drunk and one thing led to another and we slept together in the morning. I felt pretty bad because I thought I'd let myself and him down. Turns out, David had liked me since high school and thought I didn't like him back. I told him I'd liked him even before we became friends. I just didn't know how to go about it because I was the type of girl he liked. We dated for a year and got married. Our friends and family said they knew we were going to end up together because of how close we were. It was a beautiful day. My mom Beth was always on my side, and she was happy I was getting married to the love of my life. She knew right from the beginning because I always told her everything, so she wasn't surprised when we started dating after the wedding. We moved into our new house and started our lives 2 years into our marriage. David got a job back in our hometown, and we had to move. He wanted to take over the estate management of our hometown, and when he was offered the job, we didn't think I loved our hometown twice, and the job came at a time when I wanted to have my own restaurant. It was also good because we were going to be close to our family. We moved and settled in quickly. I started looking for a place to set up my restaurant and my mom helped me find a spot close to town. David had resumed his position and was settling in well. Things were moving smoothly. David and I continued to go on dates when we had time, and at the end of the date, we could always come back home. We could sleep in each other's arms as we dreamed. My mother could invite us to her house for dinner and we could talk about how we were neglecting or denying our feelings back then. It was always funny. David's parents separated a long time ago and he hadn't seen his mother for a while. His father was around for a while but disappeared a few years back. He's been part of my family ever since, and my parents treat him as if he was their own son. I was able to set up my restaurant pretty quickly. I opened the restaurant with a lot of local people there, and my business took off. It was going well. My husband and I could eat at my restaurant and spend time together before we got back to work. David was also bringing in his clients to my restaurant to have meetings during the day. His colleagues usually come around for lunch and dinner, and they usually praise me for being such a good chef. I reconnected with a lot of my school friends when we were back in town. We started hanging out again, and most of us are married now. We usually meet up to chat and catch up on the latest news. We went on spa dates and trips together. They were always talking about how shocked they were that I married my best friend. They also didn't see it coming. But only one of them knew my real feelings, and that was Ruth, my best friend. She was there for me when I needed her, especially when I saw David with other people. We got on really well, so it was great to be back home after a while. It was a bright morning after it had rained throughout the night, and David and I were getting ready to start the day. David decided that we should get breakfast at the restaurant together, so I quickly got ready and we were on our way there. I started to think about how we had settled in already and how it was time for us to have children. I knew that topic was very sensitive for David because David had a different experience growing up, and he didn't think he'd be a good father to our kids. I didn't want to push the issue further after our discussion because I knew it could make him uncomfortable. All of my friends had children by then and they were happy, but I didn't know what to do about it. It was eating me up during the car ride. David noticed that my mood had changed and he asked me what was wrong. I wanted to tell him, but I knew it could cause a lot of problems. I knew I needed to speak to someone who could understand me. I made plans to invite Ruth over to the restaurant. When David and I got to the restaurant, it was still early for the locals. Some of my staff were already on duty, but I needed to make the food myself. I made breakfast for us and we ate while discussing our plans for the day. David had told me that he was going to the city to sort some paperwork for the town and that he was going to be gone for 2 days. I was already missing him. I was starting to think he might not come back, but he said he would be back in time. David left for work and told me to take care of myself. I said goodbye and carried on with my work. It was already getting late in the afternoon and I hadn't spoken to David yet. I called him and he said he was just landing. We spoke for a while and I carried on with my work. I called Ruth a few hours later and she came over after work. Ruth was a lawyer and she was really passionate about the law. It was her thing. In college, she was like the mother of the group. She said we were either partying too much or drinking too much. She was always cool and collected, and I made her a late lunch. She always liked my cooking back then. I spoke to her about what I was going through concerning David. She advised me to just give it time, but we had been married for a while now. I was tired of giving him time. She explained to me that if I made the decision to speak to him and not be cautious about it, I knew she was right, and I decided to follow her advice. I knew that whenever David was pushed too far, he could shut down and not talk for weeks. The last time that had happened with his parents, he went on without talking for a year. Ruth advised me to take everything easy, saying that I was somewhat dealing with a child. She then proceeded to cheer me up by telling me about her husband's birthday party that was coming up in a few days. I was very happy for her and she told me I was in charge of. We also talked about the food for the event. She left, and I started getting ready for the party. I'd met Bill, Ruth's husband, a few years ago, and he's a great guy, so I was happy to help them out. I finished up and had to leave because I was tired, but I asked my staff to close up the restaurant. I got home, freshened up, and my husband called. We spoke for a while, and he told me his work had been extended. I was disappointed because I wanted to attend the party with him. I told him about the party and he said I should send his regards. He won't be able to make it a few days later. I made everything that Ruth had ordered for her husband's party and I was at the event very early to set everything up. I went there with some of my staff and I were ready for the evening. I quickly went home to change for the party. I got ready and was on my way back to the party before I got there. The party was in full swing. I joined them and looked for Ruth and Bill. I saw them together and wished Bill a happy birthday. He thanked me. I was chatting with Ruth and her husband when I saw someone I thought I'd never see again, Maxwell, my first boyfriend in high school. I was pretty blown away, and when he came over to say hello to Bill, I was speechless. I looked at Ruth, and she had this apologetic look on her face. Maxwell was my first boyfriend in high school. He tried really hard to get me over David, but it never worked. I used to use him to make David jealous, but it didn't work because David never looked my way. When I finally broke it off with him, he was really upset. He blamed me for using him and for throwing. He blamed David for the breakup, but I don't think David knew anything about Maxwell. I haven't seen him since then. I kind of still blame myself for everything that happened, and I never got the chance to apologize to him. After he finished talking to Bill and Ruth, he turned to me. I excused myself and went to the restroom. I felt like everything from last time was coming to crash down on me. I went back to the party and tried to speak with him, but he ignored me. I just wanted to apologize for what I did back then. I was about to leave the party when I saw Ruth came running up to me. She said she didn't know Maxwell was going to be there. She said he just got a new job in town. I told her to forget about it and not to bother me. I could see she was already worked up. I told her to enjoy the party. We could catch up later in the week. I went straight to bed when I got home. I left the party because I knew my staff would take care of things. David called me and we talked on the phone. I didn't tell him about Maxwell because I knew there wasn't anything to tell. He told me he was coming back the following day and I looked forward to seeing him. I went to sleep. I was thinking and praying that David and Maxwell wouldn't cross paths in this small town because I didn't want any trouble. I also knew I needed to apologize to him as soon as possible. It's been a few days and David has returned. He went to the office and was told that his boss had been transferred. David told me that his new boss had been transferred to another state and that she had been replaced by someone else. He said that he hadn't seen his new boss yet and was hoping that the new boss would appreciate his passion for the community. David and I got ready, and he drove me to the restaurant. He left shortly after, saying that today was the day he would meet his new boss. He was resuming work and needed to be there on time, so we said our goodbyes and he left. I got to work and we began serving our customers. The local people in my community are very lovely. They often have nice things to say about my food and some of them bring fresh veggies for me once in a while, which I loved. I was arranging orders in the kitchen when one of my waitresses came to tell me that a customer wanted to thank me in person. I thought it was one of my best customers at first, but when I went outside, it was Maxwell. He said he didn't enjoy the meal and had a bad experience. I knew he was trying to get to me, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. I told him we were sorry and that we could improve our services. He left the restaurant, and I felt a sigh of relief because he had become more intimidating. I got back to work and started thinking. Is this how things are going to be now with Maxwell making my life difficult? He didn't even give me a chance to explain. He was just cold. I finished my work for the day and went to see my parents. I got home and saw that my dad had gone on a business trip. My mom and I chatted for a while. She told me she'd seen Maxwell in town. I told her what had happened and she said I should apologize and move on. She also advised me to tell David everything that happened. I made plans to tell him everything that evening. I said my goodbyes to my mom and I went home to make dinner for David. I finished up dinner and he came in from work. He freshened up and I asked him about his new boss because he was awfully quiet about it. He told me his new boss was a man named Maxwell and he was making things difficult for him at the office. David felt like his boss didn't. I liked him, but I was really upset when I found out that his boss was Maxwell. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell David then that I had a history with his boss that could make things more complicated. I knew David was really troubled because he wanted to make I had to get to the bottom of why his boss was treating him so harshly. I decided I could go and see Maxwell and give him a piece of my mind because he was just being childish over nothing. The next day I met up with Ruth and I told her what was going on. I was very angry and I told her I was going to have a word with Maxwell about it. She said it wasn't a good idea, but I knew I wanted to do it because he was punishing my husband for something he didn't do, since I was trying to reach him and it was difficult. I decided that Ruth should set us up so that I could talk to him. Ruth was a bit reluctant at first, but I told her it was for my peace of mind and that I needed to apologize to him so he could leave my husband alone. She called him and he agreed to meet up with Ruth, so I went to the restaurant in the middle of town. I waited for a few minutes before he came. He tried to leave, but I managed to persuade him to listen to me. I apologized several times, and he told me I was a bad person for using him in the way I did. He said I had messed with his head for a long time. I suggested he should tell me how I could help him move forward. He said I should go on 3 dates with him. I told him that I would make sure my husband got what he deserved in terms of their work, and he agreed. I left the meeting feeling like I had won and everything was going to be all right, but I didn't realize that I was going ahead of myself and that Maxwell had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. I went home and I told Ruth that I'd managed to persuade Maxwell to let bygones be bygones. She wasn't convinced, though, and said she didn't believe he'd forgiven me without something in return. I told her the catch was that I had to go on 3 dates with him, and that didn't go down well with Ruth. I could see where she was coming from. Given that I was a married woman about to go on a date with my ex, it didn't sound good. I went on the date with Maxwell and he made me feel bad about what I did. He kept bringing up the past and each day I felt guilty sleeping next to my husband, knowing I just had dinner with. I also asked David how things were going in the office. He said that his boss was starting to warm up to him, which made me happy because it meant that my efforts weren't a waste. I was finally on the last date with Maxwell, and I was happy because I thought that at least I was going to have my life back now. But I didn't know that Maxwell was going to be sneaky. He told me the last date was going to be at his house, and I was going to make the food. I got to his house very early in the evening to prepare for dinner. I made food, and we had dinner together. I was about to leave when Maxwell pleaded with me. We had drinks together for the last time. I didn't know he was trying to get me drunk. After a few minutes, I didn't know what I was doing and ended up in bed with Maxwell in the morning. I woke up with the worst headache ever, and when I was aware of where I was, I found out I was in bed with Maxwell. Everything from the previous day came flooding back. I started crying and Maxwell tried to comfort me, but I was too upset to hear him. He promised he wouldn't mention anything that happened to my husband if I didn't want him to. I was grateful because I knew that could end my marriage. I went back home and somehow I came up with an excuse for my husband, and he bought it. I couldn't tell anyone what had happened because I knew they wouldn't believe me. I didn't have feelings for him. David left for work, and I was relieved that Maxwell wasn't going to mention what had happened to my husband. But I was very wrong. David got back from work, and he looked pretty defeated, and I knew I was done for. He told me I should explain to his boss why I was bragging about sleeping with him to my colleagues. I fell to my knees and started crying. I explained how it all started when we were in high school and how I used him to make you jealous. I also told him how he turned up a few weeks ago and was making things difficult for you because of what I'd done to him. But David didn't see my point of view. He left in a huff and I haven't seen him for a while. My marriage is officially over. I'm sad to say that my mistake led to the end of my marriage. My mistake eventually led to the end of my marriage. I trusted my ex to keep a secret, and now my marriage is over. My husband and I have gotten a divorce because of the revenge my ex took on me because of what I did years ago. I wish I hadn't let my husband down, but I was only trying to protect our marriage. I didn't know my ex was out to get my husband. Now, it's just my family and friends who are helping me pick up the pieces of my life. I regret what I did.